He was the first to touch the stone. The one buried for nearly 1,000 years beneath the western wall within hours. He was dead, not from illness, not from violence, but from something no autopsy could explain. And the last message he left behind was a single word scribbled in blood: Hadraniel. But who or what is Hadraniel? And why has everyone who tried to answer that question vanished? The warm scent of dust and limestone filled the underground corridor as Elias descended the narrow steps. The air felt older with every breath. He ran a hand along the jagged stone wall, cool and wet to the touch. Behind him, Rabbi Meir adjusted his flashlight. The beam flickered briefly, then steadied. "It was never supposed to be found," the rabbi said. Elias turned. "What do you mean?" The rabbi hesitated, then pushed open a metal hatch embedded in the stone. It groaned as it gave way, revealing a chamber lit only by a single construction lamp hanging from the ceiling. There, in the center of the room, surrounded by crumbled mortar and ancient bricks, lay the stone. It was flat, rectangular, and unnaturally smooth, not like the rough masonry around it. Symbols had been etched into its surface. Some looked vaguely like Hebrew, others like Greek numerals. But then there were marks Elias didn't recognize. Organic shapes, twisting curves. Not decorative. Deliberate. Elias stepped forward slowly, lowering his satchel to the ground. He knelt beside the stone and examined the inscription without touching it. "This doesn't belong to any one language," he murmured. "This is a synthesis." The rabbi crossed his arms. They were stabilizing the western support of the wall. That's when they broke into this space. It was sealed behind a layer of stone, untouched for centuries. Elias leaned closer. One of the symbols shimmered slightly in the lamplight, as if cut deeper than the rest. He whispered to himself, "Voynich, no, it's not identical, but close." Rabbi Meir looked at him. "You know what this is?" Elias stood. "No, but whoever carved this had a purpose. This isn't religious ornamentation. It's structured. It reads like an equation." He pulled out a small notebook and began sketching the symbols quickly. The rabbi lowered his voice. "You must understand this cannot leave this room." Elias looked up. "Why?" "There are men in this city who would kill to keep this hidden, and others who would kill to reveal it." Elias stopped writing. His eyes scanned the symbols again, now with more urgency. "Has anyone else studied this?" The rabbi hesitated. "A professor from the Hebrew University, Rivka Solomon." "And?" "She's dead. Last week, car crash, officially." Elias exhaled slowly. Something tightened in his chest. "She studied this same stone? She saw photographs, a copy. She said the patterns reminded her of an astronomical manuscript, something from the 11th century. Elias's eyes narrowed. That century produced some of the earliest mathematical models of the sky, before telescopes, before Kepler, and no one believed they were accurate. He paced slowly around the stone, then stopped, squinting at a cluster of overlapping symbols. "They're layered," he muttered, "encoded over each other, not random. This one repeats 4 times, always next to the numeric symbols." The rabbi watched in silence as Elias took out a pencil and began scribbling possibilities in his notebook. "It's a cipher," Elias said. "One I haven't seen before." From the corridor came a sudden echo, a soft metallic clang. Elias froze. The rabbi flicked off the flashlight. Silence. Then footsteps. Elias and Meir exchanged a glance. No words, just instinct. Elias shoved his notebook into his satchel and crouched behind a pillar. The rabbi moved to the far corner, silently pulling the hatch back toward closed. The steps grew louder. 3 of them. Boots, by the sound. Not construction workers. A beam of light swept across the room and landed directly on the stone. A low voice muttered something in a language Elias couldn't place. Then another voice responded, more urgent. Elias tightened his grip on the satchel. He could feel the page he'd just drawn still warm from the graphite. Whoever they weren't here to study the stone. They didn't approach it like scholars. The light shifted again. It moved toward the far wall. Elias whispered to himself, not the only ones watching. One of the men drew closer, stepping carefully around the debris. The sound of crushed gravel under boots echoed like thunder. Elias took a slow breath. The man stopped near the stone, reached into his coat, and pulled out a camera. Click. Then he whispered, "Got it." They turned. The beam of light shifted again, and just before it swept across Elias's position, the rabbi slammed the hatch shut. Total darkness. A scraping sound above them. "The hidden exit, come!" the rabbi hissed. Elias climbed the stone steps behind him, heart pounding. Behind them, voices shouted. A metal clang rang out again as the hatch was yanked open. But by then, they were already gone. Emerging into the cool night air, Elias looked back at the ancient stones of the wall. Quiet. Peaceful. As if nothing had happened. He whispered aloud to no one. "What did you see, Rivka?" Then he began walking. Fast. Tomorrow he would find her notes. The morning light in Jerusalem was sharp and golden. Elias stood outside the Hebrew University library, watching the security guards check bags at the entrance. He hated mornings like this, the kind when the world looked calm but everything inside him felt electric. He stepped through the metal detector and made his way to the Special Collections wing. The archivist, a young woman named Dahlia, was already waiting for him. "You're here for Professor Solomon's materials," Elias nodded. "She was working on a cipher. I need access to anything she left behind." Dahlia hesitated. "Her things were sealed after the accident, but I spoke to the dean. He said you could look." She led him to a quiet room in the back. No windows, just a table, a chair, and a single box. Dahlia placed it down gently and left him alone. Elias opened the lid. Inside were stacks of notes, some typed, others handwritten. A small sketchbook. Several photocopies of ancient manuscripts. He pulled out one page and studied the scribbles. Diagrams. Circles within circles. Hebrew letters repeated in a strange spiral. Greek numbers forming arcs. He flipped to another page. More symbols. This, time from the Voynich manuscript. Elias frowned. She saw the same thing I did. He scanned her annotations. Her handwriting was fast, tight, margins filled with corrections. Layered cipher, numerical rhythm, non-linear grammar. He reached for his own notebook and began comparing sketches. Side by side, the patterns began to form something more than coincidence. Hebrew characters that didn't form words, but matched numeric values. Greek numbers that repeated at intervals, not unlike Fibonacci sequences, and the Voynich symbols. Strange plant-like curves used not as language, but as spatial markers. He said aloud, "This isn't just text, it's structure. It's geometry in disguise." There was a knock at the door. Dahlia leaned in. "You have a visitor." Elias raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't expecting anyone." She stepped aside and a man entered, late 40s, short beard, dark suit, no tie. His badge flashed briefly. David Kessler, Internal Security Division. "We monitor academic leaks involving sensitive sites." Elias stayed seated. "I'm not leaking anything." Kessler ignored the comment. His eyes scanned the box. "Solomon's death was ruled an accident, but some on my team believe she was pushed." Elias looked up. "And why are you telling me this?" "Because you were seen with Rabbi Meir near the Western Wall late last night." Elias kept his voice calm. "That's not illegal." Kessler smiled faintly. "No, but people who study stones buried beneath sacred ground tend to disappear." He took a step closer. "Let me give you some advice, Dr. Ward. Whatever you think you've found, let it go. Some doors are sealed for a reason." Elias didn't respond. He simply watched Kessler turn and leave. The door clicked shut behind him. Elias exhaled slowly. He looked back at Rivka's notes. One sketch caught his attention. A 3-column layout. She had written a word next to it. "Trilingual key," Elias whispered. 3 languages, but one voice. He followed the alignment of symbols on the page. Hebrew letters along the vertical axis. Greek numerals on the horizontal. Voynich symbols marking intersections. It was a grid. He grabbed a pencil and traced the lines carefully. At each intersection, a symbol was repeated. A pattern began to emerge. He flipped back through his own sketches. The same cluster of 4 symbols from the stone under the wall appeared here. He circled them. They formed a quadrant, a perfect 90-degree angle. "That's not random," he said. "That's astronomical." He opened Rivka's sketchbook again. Tucked in the back was a printout from a satellite mapping tool, overlaid with handwritten notes. Jupiter's position. 1095 AD. March equinox, Elias. Froze. A mathematical code from the 11th century, describing a planetary alignment. He whispered, "She found the pattern, and she died days later." He copied the date into his notebook. Jupiter aligned with the moon in early spring. That alignment hadn't occurred in nearly 1,000 years, but it was coming again. Soon, Elias stood up and packed the pages carefully. Before he left the room, he looked back at the box one last time. On the side, written in pen, was a note from Rivka. "If you're reading this, don't trust the archivist." Elias paused. Then he walked out, keeping one hand inside his coat. As he passed the front desk, Dahlia smiled politely, but her hand hovered under the counter. Elias didn't stop. Outside, the wind had picked up, dry dust blowing across the courtyard. He turned toward the old part of the city. If the cipher pointed to something hidden at the time of that ancient alignment, he needed to find out what. It was before the next one arrived, and before anyone else did. The old monastery sat on the edge of the Judean hills, its white stone walls glowing in the afternoon light. Elias pushed open the wooden gate and stepped into the courtyard. Birds fluttered from the fig trees as his footsteps echoed on the worn stone path. He had come for one reason. Rivka's notes mentioned a single name linked to the cipher's structure, a name no one else seemed to recognize. Baruch al-Nahariya, mathematician, 11th century, discredited, forgotten. But the monks here had preserved some of his surviving works, manuscripts no university ever catalogued. An elderly monk approached. His robe was stained with ink. "You are Dr. Ward." Elias nodded. "You're here for the Voynich connections." That surprised him. "You've heard of them?" The monk smiled. "We don't. Forget the ones who predicted what they should not have known." He led Elias through a narrow corridor that opened into a dark chamber lined with wooden shelves. A single shaft of sunlight lit the room through a small circular window. The monk unlocked a cabinet and pulled out a bundle of parchment wrapped in cloth. "These are all we have." Elias placed the bundle on a table and carefully unwrapped it. The pages were brittle, covered in dense ink. Margins filled with equations, star maps, and words written in a mix of Hebrew and Greek. He ran a finger along a line of symbols that matched what he saw on the stone. "This is the same language." The monk watched him. Baruch believed time was not linear. He studied cycles, astronomical returns. He claimed the heavens spoke in intervals. Elias flipped to a page with a circular diagram. 3 intersecting lines. At their center, a symbol identical to one on the stone. He whispered, "A trinary. Coordinate?" The monk spoke quietly. He predicted the next triple alignment would occur in our time, and that when it did, something hidden would be revealed. Elias leaned back in his chair, and he died before he could prove it. The monk nodded, poisoned by his own students. They believed he was tampering with sacred texts. Elias stared at the diagram again. The 3 lines weren't just astronomical, they were directional. Vectors. These aren't just stars, they're coordinates. He pulled out his notebook and began plotting. The angles pointed to locations on a map. He marked each point and connected them. One landed near the Sea of Galilee, another in Damascus. The third just outside Jerusalem. He tapped the last point. Near the city walls, he stood up. I need to copy this. The monk handed him a thin sheet of tracing paper. You're not the first to come looking. A man was here 3 weeks ago. He asked about the same manuscript. Elias paused. What did he look like? American accent. Clean suit, no questions, just demands. Elias felt a chill. Did he get anything? No, but he left angry. I saw him again yesterday, in the market. He followed a woman into an alley. I don't know if she came out. Elias folded the tracing paper and placed it in his coat. I need to go, thank you for trusting me. The monk held out his hand. Be careful who you trust, Doctor. These men do not protect knowledge, they erase it. As Elias left the monastery, the wind shifted. He felt watched. He walked quickly to his car and spread the map over the hood. The coordinates made a triangle. The central point landed between 2 locations, the Temple Mount and a small forgotten synagogue just outside the old city. He said aloud, if something was buried there during the last alignment, it could still be waiting. He drove fast, weaving, through traffic, always checking his rearview mirror. When he reached the synagogue, the street was empty. No tourists, no guards, just a locked gate and silence. He climbed over. Inside, the building was crumbling. Dust covered the stone floor. Shelves once filled with books stood empty. He pulled out the map again. The inner chamber aligned with the center of the triangle. He ran his hand along the back wall, knocking gently until a hollow sound echoed back. There was something behind it. He grabbed a metal rod from the floor and wedged it into the seam. The LP's wall cracked slightly. Cold air rushed out. A narrow staircase led downward into darkness. Elias turned on his flashlight. He didn't hesitate. The stairwell was tight and cold. Each step echoed into the void below. Elias held the flashlight steady, its beam cutting through layers of dust in the air. The stone steps led him to a small underground room. No lights, no furniture, just a wide table carved from the rock itself. Above, the table etched into the stone ceiling were markings, Hebrew letters, Greek numbers. The Voynich spirals again. He ran his fingers over the symbols. This was a chamber of calculation, he whispered. They worked here, in secret. He pulled out the tracing paper from the monastery and aligned it over the carved ceiling. The pattern matched perfectly. At the center of the design, 3 symbols overlapped. One of them was the same he had seen on the original stone. He stepped back and stared at the room. This is not just a map. It's a clock, footsteps above. He froze. Voices, then silence. He turned off his flashlight and crouched behind the stone table, a faint metallic click. Someone had entered the synagogue. He waited. 10 seconds, then 20. Soft shoes on old stone. A figure appeared at the top of the stairs. Tall, moving slowly. Not searching, just walking. A woman. Elias stood. She jumped, startled. You scared me, she said. Elias kept his voice low. You followed me. I didn't. I was already looking for this place. He stepped into the light. Who are you, Naomi? I worked with Professor Solomon. Elias narrowed his eyes. She's dead, Naomi nodded. I know. That's why I'm here. They stood in silence for a moment. Then she pulled something from her bag, a folder. These were her last notes. She mailed them to me 2 days before the crash. Elias opened the folder. Inside were diagrams, handwritten pages, a timeline. "This is everything," he said. Naomi spoke quickly. She believed the cipher was counting down, a celestial equation. She didn't say what it was for, but she was afraid. Elias pointed to one of the notes. "Here, this sequence repeats every 972 years. That's the cycle Baruch wrote about." Naomi nodded. She traced it to the coming equinox, said something, would realign. "Something buried long ago," Elias looked up. "What killed her?" Naomi hesitated. "They said it was a crash, but her brakes were cut. She called me that morning. She said someone was watching her apartment." Elias clenched his jaw. "And now, they're watching me." He gathered the pages quickly. "We can't stay here. If they followed you, they're close." Naomi moved to the stairs. Outside, the sun had started to fall. Shadows stretched long across the stones. Elias led her through an alley, avoiding the main streets. He turned a corner, stopped. A man in a black coat stood ahead, his eyes locked with Elias's. No expression. Elias grabbed Naomi's arm and pulled her back. They ran, down a side street, past shuttered doors and laundry lines. A car turned the corner behind them. Naomi shouted, "This way." She pulled him through a metal gate into a courtyard. Elias slammed it shut behind them. They ducked behind an old oven. Silence. Then tires screeched. Past, Naomi looked at Elias. "You still think this is just history?" Elias didn't answer. He opened the folder again. One page stood out, a diagram of overlapping planets, with a line drawn to an ancient calendar. At the bottom, Rivka had written a single phrase. "The cipher unlocks time itself." He read it twice. "It's metaphor. Has to be." But the numbers made sense. This is not about prophecy. It's about precision. Something is hidden, something that only reveals itself during this alignment. Naomi leaned closer. "Then we have 3 days," Elias nodded, "and no more margin for error." He folded the papers and placed them inside. His coat. "We need to find the original documents. Rivka must have left something more." Naomi hesitated. "There's a storage unit. She kept personal records there, but it's outside the city, near the old British checkpoint." Elias stood. "Then, we go now." Before they realize we're ahead of them, as they slipped out through the back of the courtyard, Elias looked up. The sky was darkening. Jupiter had just begun to rise. The road out of the city was narrow and cracked. Elias drove fast, his eyes flicking from the map to the dark horizon. Naomi sat beside him, scanning Rivka's notes by the light of her phone. "The checkpoint's ahead," she said. "Her storage unit is just past the old customs building." They parked behind an abandoned bus stop. No lights, just silence, and the smell of dry earth. The unit was hidden behind a rusted fence. Naomi climbed over first. Elias followed, landing with a thud. Inside the warehouse yard, rows of metal doors stretched into the darkness. She found the one marked J4 and pulled out a key. The door creaked open. Stacks of boxes, books, a rolled-up rug, shelves with dusty folders. Elias turned on his flashlight and swept the beam across the room. Naomi pointed. "That one, the blue case. She always kept her personal research separate." Elias opened it carefully. Inside, dozens of index cards, each one numbered, handwritten, some covered in red ink. He flipped through quickly. Chronologies, astronomical, tables, old Hebrew manuscripts, a diagram of stone architecture. He paused on a folded blueprint. "Wait, this isn't from a university. This is architectural." He unfolded it on the ground. It showed the foundation of a building. Columns, hidden passageways, handwritten in the margin. Layer 3, Shealtiel Synagogue. Naomi knelt beside him. That synagogue was sealed decades ago. Earthquake damage. No one goes in anymore. Elias traced the underground level marked on the blueprint. There's a chamber below the third support column, and something behind the western wall. He looked at her. Help me roll this up. We're going tonight. They drove without headlights for most of the route. When they arrived, the ruins of the Shealtiel synagogue stood silent beneath the moonlight. Vines climbed the old stones. The front door was chained shut. Naomi picked the lock with a paperclip. Elias raised an eyebrow. "Where did you learn that?" she smiled. Studying under Rivka wasn't all books. They slipped inside. Dust hung in the air. The ceiling had partially collapsed. Benches were broken. Fragments of stained glass crunched underfoot. Elias pulled out the blueprint again. The column is there, left of the altar. He knelt and examined the base. It looked solid, but the floor around it showed cracks in a circular pattern. He whispered, "It's not original. It was rebuilt to cover something." He ran his hand along the groove and found a slight notch. He pressed it. A click. A section of the floor dropped down 2 inches. He pushed it aside, revealing a stone shaft and a rusty ladder descending into the dark. Naomi stared. "You're really going down there?" Elias grabbed his flashlight and looked at her. "This is the first time I've been closer to the origin of this cipher than anyone else. I'm not stopping now." He climbed down. Naomi followed. The ladder ended in a narrow stone tunnel. Carvings covered the walls. Elias traced them with the light. The same 3 scripts again, but this time no overlap. They're separated, side by side. He stepped forward. The tunnel opened into a chamber. Square. Perfectly symmetrical. A stone pedestal at the center. Above it, on the wall, an inscription. He read aloud. "When the 3 voices speak in silence, time will open." He turned to Naomi. "It's a riddle, 3 languages, 1 message, but not spoken, written." She pointed to the pedestal. A small slot was carved into its surface. Square. Thin. Elias pulled out the folded diagram from Rivka's storage. She knew. This diagram was meant to be placed here. He inserted it into the slot. Nothing happened. Naomi whispered, "Maybe the diagram is wrong." Elias looked around the room. He tapped one wall, then another. The walls themselves are part of the mechanism. He stepped back to the entrance and studied the layout. 3 walls, 3 scripts, 3 voices. He pulled out a pen and marked the walls. Then he returned to the pedestal and rotated the diagram 90 degrees. The stone shook gently, then stopped. On the opposite wall, a small panel slid open. Behind it, a cloth bundle rested on a carved shelf. Elias reached in and unwrapped it. Inside was a journal, leather-bound, ancient, no title. He opened it carefully. Inside, written in tight Hebrew script, were entries dated 1093. The handwriting was mathematical. Each page filled with graphs, formulas, and diagrams. Elias turned the page. His breath caught. A full-page diagram showed the planetary alignment for the upcoming equinox. At the bottom, in Greek numerals, was the year. This year. Naomi stared. He knew, Elias whispered. Baruch was never trying to predict the future. He was hiding something in it. Behind them, the ladder creaked. Someone else had just entered the tunnel. Elias pressed his back against the cold stone wall. Above them, the ladder shook again. Whoever was climbing down wasn't rushing. Every step was careful, measured. He turned to Naomi and spoke in a whisper. Flashlight off. No sound. Back to the corridor. They moved silently through the narrow tunnel, Elias gripping the journal tight under his coat. The moment they reached the base of the ladder, Elias looked up. A shadow moved across the opening. He pulled Naomi into a side alcove just as a man dropped down. Tall, broad shoulders, military boots. He stood for a moment, scanning the room. then drew a small device from his pocket. It emitted a faint beeping sound. He started walking toward the pedestal chamber. Elias leaned in. He's tracking something. Maybe heat, maybe motion, Naomi whispered. He'll find us in seconds. Elias reached into his coat and pulled out a small penlight. He clicked it once, nothing, twice. A red beam flickered. He tossed it down the tunnel. The man turned and followed the light. Now, Elias said. They climbed fast. Naomi slipped near the top. Elias caught her arm and pushed her over the edge. They ran through the ruins and out into the night. Back in the car, Elias slammed the door shut and pulled onto the road. They didn't speak for a long time. Only when they were far enough from the city did Naomi finally ask, "What now?" Elias looked at her. "We go to the archives," she frowned. "Why?" He tapped the leather journal. "This is not complete. Baruch makes references to older documents, his own sources. I need to see what he saw. And there's only one place that might still hold a copy." She understood. The Museum of Israel. They parked in a delivery zone behind the building. It was just past midnight. The museum was closed. Elias produced a key card. Naomi raised an eyebrow. "You broke into a national museum before?" He smirked. "I gave a lecture here 3 years ago. They never revoked my access." Inside, the hallways were dark. They passed. Silent statues and display cases covered in sheets. The archives were in the lower levels behind a coded door. Elias typed the sequence. The lock clicked open. Rows of shelves stretched in all directions. Ancient texts, recovered scrolls, coded boxes, dust thick on everything. Naomi followed as Elias moved quickly. He stopped at a cabinet marked K7. Baruch's lineage connects to the early Karaites. This drawer holds the private correspondences from that sect. He pulled it open. Scrolls and fragments lay inside, most in Hebrew, a few in Greek. He found one marked 972 CE, astronomical treatise. Elias unfolded the parchment carefully. Diagrams filled the page. One showed the same trinary alignment from the journal, but below it, AERDI note, to seal what must not be read. He studied it closely. They weren't just predicting, they were hiding something, using celestial cycles as locks. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed in the hallway. Naomi turned. That wasn't wind. Elias shoved the parchment inside his coat. The lights flickered. Footsteps approached fast, then a scream. Not Naomi's. They ran toward the source. In a side hallway, a security guard lay motionless, a pool of blood beneath his head. His radio buzzed with static. Naomi froze. But he was already scanning the floor. The killer had come from the eastern wing. He grabbed Naomi's hand. "We need to move, now." They slipped into a service corridor and emerged into the main exhibit hall. Alarms had not been triggered. That meant someone was bypassing them. "This was professional," Elias said. "And he didn't come for the artifacts?" Naomi asked. "Then what?" He looked at her. "He came for us." They reached the loading dock. A second car was parked beside theirs. Black, government plates. Elias didn't hesitate. He took Naomi's hand and ran for the alley behind the museum. Only when they were 6 blocks away did they stop. They caught their breath near a fountain. Naomi stared at him. "Why are they killing for this?" Elias opened the journal again. One page had been folded at the corner. He opened it. There, written in small script, was a passage. "When the 3 gates align, the vault will open. Inside, the true calendar of creation." He looked at her. "They're not after prophecy. They're after control," she nodded. "And you're getting too close." Elias turned to the dark sky. Jupiter glowed above the rooftops. 3 nights left, he said aloud, almost to himself. Whatever they buried back then, they never meant anyone to find it again. The apartment was small, hidden on the edge of East Jerusalem. Naomi's cousin had offered it for the night. No questions asked. Elias sat at the table, surrounded by papers, books, and fragments of parchment. The journal of Baruch lay open in front of him. Naomi poured hot water into a cracked mug. "You haven't slept," she said. Elias didn't look up. "I can't. There's something missing, something right in front of us." He had been decoding symbols for hours, cross-referencing the ancient diagrams with modern astronomy charts. "The three gates," he muttered. "Jupiter, the Moon, and Mercury, they're the markers. But they aren't just celestial, they're geographical." Naomi leaned over the table. "You think the alignment is tied to locations?" Elias nodded. "Each planet corresponds to a place, not metaphorical, actual points on Earth. The triangle they form is real and it's shifting." He pointed to a map on the wall. Red thread connected 3 locations: Jerusalem, Damascus, Qumran. He stood and traced the lines with his finger. If these 3 align during the equinox, something ancient will be exposed. A structure, a chamber, maybe a device. Naomi watched him in silence. Elias sat again and picked up the folded blueprint from the synagogue vault. Baruch wasn't just writing predictions, he was setting a lock that only opens when the sky and the ground reflect each other perfectly. He tapped a circle drawn near the bottom of the page. It's a time key. Each number here corresponds to a year, but the year 2025 is circled 3 times. Naomi blinked. "That's now." Elias opened the museum parchment again. "The true calendar of creation," he read. "If this is real, it could override thousands of years of religious chronology." "That would change everything," Naomi whispered. "That's why they're trying to stop us." He nodded. "And why Rivka had to die." He stood and walked to the window. The night sky was clear. Jupiter gleamed high above the hills. Elias spoke softly. "This isn't prophecy. It's precision." Suddenly, a soft buzz echoed from the hallway. Naomi moved toward the door and looked through the peephole. A man in uniform, Israeli security, but his badge isn't visible. Elias pulled the journal from the table and stuffed it into his satchel. "We have to leave. Now." They exited through the kitchen and out into a side alley. The sound of a door opening behind them. Footsteps. A voice speaking into a radio. They didn't look back. Down a flight of stone stairs, through narrow streets and into a crowded night market. Elias slowed near a spice vendor. He turned to Naomi. "We need help. I can't finish this alone." She looked confused. "Who?" Elias pulled out a business card from his wallet. "Someone who still owes me a favor." 2 hours later, they arrived at the gates of a private observatory built into the hillside, near Ramallah. The door opened before they knocked. A man in a long coat appeared. White hair, sharp eyes. "Still chasing shadows, Elias?" Elias smiled. "Still hiding telescopes under political noise, Adam." Adam gestured them inside. "Come in, before someone sees you." The observatory interior was filled with machines, screens, and star charts. Adam poured whiskey into a glass. "You're not here for astronomy, are you?" Elias handed him the journal. Adam scanned a few pages, then stopped. "These projections are advanced. The math is sound, but this is more than astronomy. This is celestial engineering." Elias pointed to the symbol stamped at the bottom of the page. "That mark appears on an underground stone chamber beneath Jerusalem. I've seen it. It's real." Adam looked up sharply. "Then you have a problem, because that symbol is also found in Vatican astronomy papers, declassified 2 decades ago. Same alignment, same time window." Naomi leaned forward. "You mean they've known about this?" Adam nodded. "But they've never agreed on what it is. Some say it's a vault. Others say it's a countdown to some hidden truth, but they all fear it." Elias asked one question. "Can you confirm the alignment?" Adam stood and turned to his main monitor. He typed quickly. Star charts shifted across the screen. Then he stopped. 3 planets aligned, one line pointed directly to a location just east of the Dead Sea. Adam turned back to Elias. You have 36 hours. After that, the window closes for another 972 years. Elias stared at the screen. Then that's where we're going. The desert wind howled across the Dead Sea basin. Elias stood at the edge of the cliffs, staring down at the rocky valley below. Naomi adjusted her scarf and pointed to a narrow path that curved along the ridge. Satellite scan shows a collapsed plateau there. Matches the final coordinate. They descended slowly, boots slipping on loose gravel, no sound but wind and their own breath. At the bottom, hidden behind a wall of broken limestone, was a dark opening. Almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. Elias brushed away the dust and revealed a symbol carved into the rock, the same 3-pointed star from the journal. He pressed his palm against it. The stone shifted slightly. Mechanism clicked from inside. They pushed the door open. Inside, the chamber was vast. Columns rose into darkness. The floor was perfectly smooth, carved with astronomical lines and markers. A soft glow filled the space. Light reflected from thin crystal panels embedded in the ceiling. Naomi whispered, "This was built with purpose." Elias moved forward. At the center of the room stood a tall stone obelisk. Around it, 3 rings rotated slowly, engraved with text in Hebrew, Greek, and Voynich. A control panel was carved into the base. Elias studied the rings. They're not decorative, they're part of the lock. He reached into his coat and pulled out Baruch's journal. He flipped to the last diagram, 3 rotational positions, one for each language. He read the note again. When the 3 voices speak in silence, time will open. He turned the rings. Hebrew first, then Greek, then the unknown script. Each ring clicked into place with a deep echoing sound. The obelisk began to glow from within. A seam opened down its center. It split. Inside, protected by layers of glass, was a single parchment. Elias stared at it. Naomi stepped closer. "What does it say?" Elias read it once. Then again, a simple sentence, 12 characters, but he understood instantly. It's a recalibration formula. It resets the 0 point of our calendar, based on actual astronomical origin, not religious tradition. Naomi blinked. "You mean it changes year 1? He nodded. "By centuries." Naomi sat down on the stone floor. "That would collapse everything. Do you realize what this would mean for governments, religions, historical timelines?" Elias did not answer. He looked back at the parchment, then at the surrounding chamber, the architecture, the logic, the scale. "This was never meant to be seen by the world," he said. "It was meant to be preserved until someone could understand it, not weaponize it." Footsteps echoed from the entrance. They turned. The man from the archive stepped out of the shadows. Black coat, pale face. He was not holding a weapon, just a phone. "You found it," he said. Elias stood between the obelisk and the man. "You already knew it existed." The man nodded. "We knew it might, but not where. Not exactly," Naomi whispered. "Who are you?" The man ignored her. He looked at Elias. "You can leave it here, walk away, or you can leak it to the world and start a war no one is ready for." Elias stared at him. "You kill scholars, you silence evidence." The man took a step closer. "We preserve order, that cipher you love so much. It's a match that could burn down everything." Elias turned back to the parchment. He thought of Rivka, of the monk who warned him, of Baruch, who encoded his knowledge to survive dogma and fear. He whispered, "The truth was never the danger. The people who fear it are." Naomi placed her hand on his arm. "We can hide it again, somewhere else where they'll never find it." Elias nodded slowly. He took the parchment, slid it back into its case and closed the obelisk. The rings locked again with a deep final sound. He faced the man. "You'll never see it again." The man said nothing. He turned and disappeared into the shadows. Elias and Naomi stood in silence. She asked, "Do we even tell anyone?" Elias looked at the walls around him, thousands of years of silence. He answered softly, "Maybe the world isn't ready to rewrite time." They left the chamber and sealed the door behind them. As they climbed back into the light, the first glow of sunrise touched the cliffs. Elias looked to the east and whispered the final line from Baruch's journal. "Hadraniel knows the names, but he will never speak them." Naomi looked at him. "Who is Hadraniel?" Elias adjusted his coat. "Not who, what?" He looked down at the ground. "The last gate." And if this equation was only one part of a larger mechanism, if Baruch left more than one lock, what else have they buried? Waiting for someone who can still read the sky.